Well, thank you everyone for joining our webinar today. I am Brian David, Managing Director at the Lloyd Group. Cyber security and risk management obviously need no introduction these days. They are topics that are very front of mind for everyone, and I imagine that's why you're joining our webinar today. A little bit of background about the Lloyd and Arctic Wolf partnership. And when building out our cyber security and risk management platform at Lloyd, it was very important to us to find partners who share our desire for providing an exceptional client experience, while providing great solutions and services. And thankfully, from a cybersecurity operations standpoint, we successfully found that with Arctic Wolf. The partnership between our two firms over the last 2-3 years has been tremendously successful. Aside from working together on a day-to-day basis on reviewing client alerts and day-to-day items for the services that we're engaged together on, we're regularly meeting and talking about ways that we could be better at helping to minimize our clients' risk and improve the partnership between our two firms. We have two primary speakers today. The first I'm going to introduce is Sam Dunn. Sam is an account executive for Arctic Wolf for the New York City area. He's been working with Arctic Wolf for the last 2.5 years. Sam has a background in a lot of different industries, some that I'm going to list: financial services, particularly banks, hedge funds, credit unions. He also has experience working with legal and manufacturing, as well as other industries. And with regards to just some personal items for Sam, he is a Minnesota sports fan and avid skier, both water and downhill. He's also a fisher and a golfer. Our second primary speaker today, Bill Golden. Bill and I have worked together at Lloyd for, I think, close to 20 years. Bill is our Director of Cybersecurity and Risk Management. Bill, throughout his career, has worked in a number of various security and project management roles. He was instrumental in helping us build out our cybersecurity and risk management platform at Lloyd. He is CISSP certified and is currently running our SOC 2 certification process at Lloyd. Bill is an avid golfer, New York sports fan, and he can be seen regularly these days on the side of a swimming pool, cheering on his daughters at their swim meets. With regard to the agenda, just a quick run through before I hand it over to both Sam and Bill. We're going to do an overview of the NIST framework and background around security operations. So that's both Bill and Sam are going to touch base on that. We're going to give a background of the cyber insurance landscape. To add a little fun into our webinar today, Sam is going to run us through a quick cybersecurity Jeopardy game. And then we're going to jump into how Lloyd Group and Arctic Wolf deliver services. We're going to run through the services themselves, and then what's next on the horizon. At the end of the presentation, we're going to leave a little bit of time for Q&A. During the presentation, feel free to use the Q&A function at the top of your screen. Just feel free to drop questions into the Q&A chat throughout the presentation, and our goal would be that we're able to cover them at the end. Any that we don't get to by the end of the webinar, we'll make sure that we address afterwards. And with that, I will hand it over to Bill and Sam.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks so much for that, Brian. So to kind of get things underway after that good run through of the agenda, I'll pass it over to Bill here to kind of walk through the NIST cybersecurity framework. Bill, go ahead and take it away.
Sure. So we want to just touch base on the NIST cybersecurity framework because this is kind of the framework we follow, and really going through this whole presentation, we want to make sure we understand how Lloyd and Arctic Wolf work together to kind of help fill some of these requirements. So first is identify. So with any kind of security incident, you want to basically make sure you can identify what assets you have, the data that you're protecting. So you want to have a whole picture of what's going on before, because if you don't identify what you're doing and what assets you have, you can't move on to the next step, which is protect. So when we think about protect, these are going to be things like antivirus, firewalls. This is what people really think about when they're talking about security, is having these different mechanisms in place to kind of stop the bad guys. From there, we move on to detect. So it's great that we have these things in there. We know our assets, we have firewalls, antivirus, but really the key factor here is detecting. You want to make sure you detect that something's wrong or there's something indicator of compromise very quickly. So the quicker you can detect it, the quicker then you can then move on to the next stage, which is respond. So responding to cybersecurity incidents is very critical. So you need to make sure you have all that data. You need to know what's going on, where is it coming from, where is it going, how did it happen, and basically once you gather all that information and start responding, you then move on to kind of the recovery phase. So the recovery could be, restoring from backups, resetting passwords, going through that. But the big part of that recovery is making sure that you plan for the future, going through and doing kind of the lessons learned. So what happened, how did it happen, and how do we prevent this from happening again, so we're not going through this whole process. So just kind of quickly wanted to go over that, the security operations framework there, just to make sure that we all aligned. And I'll hand it back to Sam.
Perfect. Thanks so much for that, Bill. And yeah, that kind of tees it up nicely to show where Arctic Wolf stands in the marketplace today. We're actually built off of the NIST cybersecurity framework, and this is, really the gap that we're helping solve for in the cybersecurity space today to get organizations really to where they want to be in their security journey, being proactive, confident, compliant, and insurable organization is really the end goal and the end stage that organizations want to be at. But in cybersecurity, it's not just an end destination. It's really going to be a journey that you have to get to. And if you look on the left-hand side, this is where most organizations are at today, and what you may already be partnering with Lloyd Group to do some of these things to proactively protect your environment. And it's actually how the cybersecurity threat landscape has progressed over time. So, back in the 90s when cybersecurity was very basic, a lot of organizations just had things in place like user and Active Directory, patching, backups, stuff to proactively protect their environment and make sure that threat actors weren't getting access to sensitive information within the organization. But, as time progressed and the threat landscape became more and more advanced with cloud, organizational growth, multiple different tools that organizations were using to have, business efficiencies and things like that, also threat actors became more advanced and found ways to bypass some of these basic perimeter and defense in-depth tools to get access to companies' sensitive information. So having things in place like firewalls, IDS, IPS, endpoint detection and response, DLP solutions in place. These are all things that are great and necessary for organizations to really have that defense in depth. But being that bad actors were becoming more and more advanced and still finding ways to bypass these tools, there came a time where organizations needed to take a security operational approach. And having the people, processes, and technologies paired with the current tools that you're currently leveraging today to really get to that business resilience is where organizations need to. And Arctic Wolf solves, and Lloyd Group solve for that by delivering this as a service, because a lot of organizations can't hire on the full-time employees to handle this for their organization. So we deliver this to you as a service. And there are a couple of key pillars as to how we differentiate in the market space. For one, we're seeing broad visibility across your threat landscape. So seeing across not only endpoint, but network, cloud, as well as identity, and pulling all of that telemetry into the back end of our platform. The other thing that's important about security operations is having 24/7 eyes on glass. So we'll talk a little bit about the two teams that help deliver Arctic Wolf services in partnership with Lloyd Group. The team that's going to be doing the 24/7 coverage is our 600 plus individuals on the triage team that are going to be monitoring your environment on a 24/7 basis. And not only being reactive in the cybersecurity journey, but also being proactive too, as Bill mentioned, with the cybersecurity NIST framework is extremely important to achieving that business resilience. So how we solve for that is by giving organizations and Lloyd Group access to expertise. So We have a concierge security team that's individuals that work with Lloyd Group on a quarterly or monthly basis to provide strategic guidance for you as an organization as to how you can continuously improve your security posture over time. So not only being reactive in that security approach, but also being proactive to overall achieve that business resilience that you're looking for. And when I go through this, a lot of organizations say, Sam, this is great. We really want to prevent cybersecurity threats from entering our environment. But what are some other reasons why companies purchase Arctic Wolf? Well, a big topic of conversation today is really the cyber insurance market space. And the reason it's become such a hot topic of conversation is because there's been a lot of fluctuation within this industry. Providers are raising rates at an extremely exponential rate right now, and they're slashing coverage for key things like ransomware, business email compromise attacks. And the reason for this, I actually talked to a colleague that I have who's in this industry, who works as a broker, and he said about 7 years ago, he had 2 or 3 organizations that were covered by cyber insurance. Progressing to today, he has about 200 to 300 organizations who use or leverage cyber insurance. And that's great because a lot of organizations are doing some of this as a risk transfer to transfer some of that risk off of their organization. The problem that came into play with that is that there were more and more claims coming to these cyber insurance providers, and the actuaries working at these providers got enough data to identify, okay, what are some key things that we need to make sure the organizations that we're providing insurance to are doing so they're not putting in as many claims with us. So if you see some of the key check boxes here, this is what's being asked on a lot of cyber insurance questionnaires. And Arctic Wolf either helps solve for or strengthen and support some of these key factors like multi-factor authentication, managing vulnerabilities, protected networks, log monitoring and aggregation, and also some of the ones that we're not necessarily fully solving for that we're just strengthening or supporting. Lloyd Group has partners with a lot of other vendors that can help fully solve for this. So when you're filling out a cyber insurance application, you have a very strong case as to why you can get a competitive rate in insurance. So just something that we thought we'd touch on because it's an extremely important topic and coming up in a lot of our conversations today. I then want to kind of dive into a little bit about, okay, what is Arctic Wolf delivering as services? And then how is Lloyd Group adding on top of that to really holistically deliver the security outcomes that your organization is looking for? So I'll talk a little bit about the left-hand side and the services that we offer at a high level. We'll dive into them deeper, and then I'll let Bill talk a little bit about what Lloyd Group is adding on top of that. So our flagship offering is managed detection and response. And what that really is going to be 24/7 monitoring from across your threat landscape, seeing across that endpoint network and identity telemetry and gathering that all into the back end of our platform so we can identify where cyber threats are happening and what we need to do to remediate that. Our managed cloud monitoring is also an add-on to that because a lot of organizations are operating in the cloud today, whether that be infrastructure as a service with Azure or with AWS, and also SaaS applications like your Office 365. We're seeing a lot of attacks come from the cloud today. So making sure you're monitoring that is extremely important. So that's more of our reactive service that helps with security. Our more proactive service in nature is that managed risk service. And what that is continuous vulnerability scanning of your environment, making sure we're identifying any key misconfigurations or vulnerabilities that may leave your company exposed to cyber attackers and having an easy way for them to get in, really making sure we're prioritizing those with the Lloyd Group team to overall harden your security posture over time. And then a couple other things that we're doing that are delivered by the concierge security team is helping with compliance and supporting on meetings and support and just really overall improving your cybersecurity posture over time. Bill, could you talk a little bit about what else Lloyd Group is delivering on top of Arctic Wolf services to kind of gather that holistic approach?
Sure. So Lloyd Group together a platform. We have our basic standard stuff that we give out for clients like EDR and email filtering. But on top of that, we also do tabletop exercises. So it's a great way to actually test your incident response program. So we'll actually bring in the leadership team and we'll go through a simulated kind of cybersecurity incident where we're giving you piecemeal information, stopping, asking a bunch of questions, then giving you more information, injecting new things, and asking more questions. And at the end of it, we'll go through kind of what we call a hot wash, where we'll go through and ask what was good, what was bad, and then we'll give you all the recommendations. So that is something great for the team to go through. It's kind of a fun exercise, because there's not an actual cyber incident, but we're just going through it. So get you prepared for when there actually is one. You've kind of gone through it, you know who's communicating, who's calling. There's a lot of things that are not on the technical side, that Lloyd Group would not handle. So security awareness training. So this is going through learning about all the new kind of techniques that are out there from the different attack vectors and what's going on with ransomware, phishing, business email compromise, all the new tactics. So we go through that, as well as doing quarterly phishing tests. So basically it's good to train, but you also need to test. So you want to see where your users are. And if they fail training, we set up where they actually go through. If they fail a phishing test, they'll go through remediation training. So you can set that up. CIS top 18, so the Center for Internet Security, they have the top 18 controls. So they break this down into 18 different controls. Each of one of them have 5 to 10. And what we do is compare you to those industry standards, so you know where you kind of stand. It also helps identify gaps. So in certain areas you're good, certain areas you need to work on. So this really helps build out kind of your risk register and also your security roadmap. Office 365 security assessments. So Office 365 is probably one of the biggest things people are attacking with business email compromise, and Microsoft is constantly changing. They're adding new things, and also the bad guys are finding new ways to get in. So what Lloyd Group has done is we've taken a combination of CIS, best practices, Microsoft Secure Score, and our own best practices from lessons learned and industry standards, and put them together into an assessment we're constantly reviewing. So we're going through annual assessments, reviewing clients, because what we did last year is not going to be good enough for the next year. So we want to make sure you're constantly up to date, what's going on, and protecting yourselves from the latest attacks. Next up is security and risk advisory services. So this is really just helping out with anything that comes in. So a lot of things we're seeing is filling out cyber insurance forms, vendor due diligence forms. If you have a client that has questions about your security, we can hop on. If there's certain security things that are going on, you want to talk about it, you can reach out to us. So we're kind of helping you there with that and everything else. The last one is security policy management and development. So, Sam was talking about cyber insurance. One of the first questions on every form is, do you have an information security policy? So if you don't have one, then they're automatically think you're not taking security seriously. So you want to make sure you have a documented policy of what's going on. So we'll work with you to develop that policy. And out of that policy, things that we're not doing, we'll add to kind of a risk register. So we'll review that risk register with you and going through. And that's part of the advisory service as well, where we're reviewing those risks, knowing that, working with your team, and really trying to build out that security roadmap to help kind of close some of those gaps and remove some of those risks to the business. So.
Perfect. Yeah. Thanks so much for that, Bill. All right. Perfect. And we're going to take a little quick break in the action here and do something that's a little bit more interactive. So we got a cybersecurity Jeopardy. I guess it's not really going to be Jeopardy. It's going to be more of a trivia thing. So you can't take yourself off mute, but put any of your answers that you have in the chat, and we'll identify who gets the most question right. And we actually have a little prize for the person at the end who actually ends up winning the trivia here. So, we'll start it off with the first question. Just put all your answers in the chat. I'll then, kind of tally them up and see who gets the most right. So first question here, what attack vector is an organization's weakest link and a cyber criminals target the most? So I'll give everyone 15 quick seconds here to kind of put their answers in the chat. I said I would tally them, but I can't actually see anything. So we'll have Jaden or one of our team members tally them up at the end here. All righty, perfect. So with that, the answer is end users. So a lot of people think sometimes it's cloud or it's endpoints, but it's really end users. End users are the most common ways that cyber and threat actors are trying to get access to company information and infiltrate your environment. So as Bill talked a little bit about, having security awareness training is going to be hugely important for your business and organization to make sure that your employees know what to do if they see a phishing email, how to report it, and how to just, operate on company laptops and workstations effectively so they're not putting your organization at risk. So very important to keep your end users up to date and trained. All right, we'll dive into the next question here. What does XDR stand for? Lots of acronyms in the cybersecurity space. I'll give a quick hint. The first word does not start with an X. All righty, I hope some answers have gone into the chat. Give about 3 more seconds. And the answer is extended detection and response. So what this means is, it's really gaining the holistic visibility that we talked about early on in this call from across your threat landscape. So you're not having to go into multiple different sources to see where a threat is at within your environment. So gathering telemetry from multiple different sources and pulling it all into one single pane of glass. This is actually what our cloud platform is built on, an open XDR architecture. So we're able to gather telemetry from all different sources, not making organizations rip or replace any of the current tool stack that they have in place today. And then we're going to go on to the final question. This one's a little bit trickier because it's a specific number, but in millions, what is the average cost of an incident for SMB organizations today? So 1 to 500 users. And then a bonus question, what is the average downtime after an incident has occurred in a company's environment? This one, I was even surprised by the numbers, so think high with it. All right. Give about 5 more seconds for people to put their answers in. And the answer is just over $3 million per an IMDb report pulled from 2022. So IMB pulls reports on these things and sends out an annual report as to what the average cost is for an incident. And this can come from multiple different sources. So it could be for legal fees or fines that an organization has to pay out because of a security incident, downtime that they've experienced. So if you see the other answer to the question was 21 days of downtime for an organization, that can be a huge effect on a lot of organizations experiencing that amount of downtime, not being able to run or operate as a business effectively. And also too, just, increases in cyber insurance policies that they may see coming from a cybersecurity incident like that. So thanks for everyone who participated in this. We'll tally up who all got the most answers right, and we'll send out that gift card prize that we have here shortly after. But now we kind of want to dive back into a little bit about the specifics of Arctic Wolf services and how we're working with the Lloyd Group team to deliver these effectively. So in talking about, we talked about the team, technologies, and processes that you need to have in place to really have an effective security operations program for your organization. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the 2 teams that help deliver Arctic Wolf services. And, Bill will talk a little bit about how the Lloyd Group cybersecurity and risk management team works with these 2 teams to deliver a full holistic security operations service to you. So we have the triage team, which I talked a little bit about earlier. That's 600 plus individuals throughout the globe that are security experts in the space. And they're going to be the individuals that are more tactical side of security. So running the investigations that they see that are coming from across an organization's threat landscape and doing the investigations on those, seeing if either, hey, this is not a security threat, this is a false positive, we don't need to investigate this further and we can vet this out, or B, hey, this is an actual potential incident going on in a customer's environment. Here's how the bad actor got in, why they got in, and here's what steps are needed for the remediation process. And then working with the Lloyd Group cybersecurity and risk management team to fully remediate and recover from that threat. And then after the threat, one of the big points of the NIST framework is the recovery process. And that's kind of where the concierge security team steps in. They're the more strategic approach to security. So this is 3 individuals that work with the Lloyd Group team on a continuous basis and are going to get to know and understand your environment, your organizational goals as you're looking to continuously improve your cybersecurity posture. They're going to look at some of the incidents we may have had a scare with or experienced in the past, and what we can do to proactively improve your security posture through what we call our security posture in-depth reviews, or SPIDERs. So looking at your Office 365 configuration, looking at ransomware and malware hardening, making sure we're doing those strategic steps to continuously improve your organization to business resilience over time. So that's the 2 teams that work on the Arctic Wolf side of things. Bill, you want to talk a little bit about how the Lloyd cybersecurity and risk management team works with those teams?
Sure. So look here, we have 2 different teams. One is the cybersecurity and risk management team, so CNR for short. We're basically working with the concierge teams to make sure that everything is being monitored, all the firewalls, cloud accounts, Sentinel-1 or antivirus. So we're making sure we're grabbing all that data and telemetry to make sure the system is working, and also working with them to customize rules to go through that. So we're also we meet with them quarterly to review the accounts, make sure nothing has changed. If anything's added, anything that news coming up that Arctic Wolf has, then this team will kind of work through it and implement it. So, and then our team is also taking all those. We're doing like a monthly report, and we're working with our clients to show them like, hey, here's all the stuff that happened. Here's what Arctic Wolf did, alerted us on, and here's how Lloyd handled it. So you're getting kind of a full picture of what's going on. And we're doing kind of recommendations from a security side, whether it was some vulnerabilities that's showing up, or, hey, these are repeat offenders, we need to do some training or additional mechanisms or security products that help reduce your risk. Then we have the Lloyd, just the regular support team. So they're the ones working with the triage team. So Arctic Wolf will create tickets into our ticketing system. We'll review those tickets, and anything that happens, they'll raise it. If it's a security incident that needs to be escalated, it goes to our team leads and works with a CNR analyst that's dedicated to the account. And we'll work through that and work with the triage team to final resolution with that. So, and anything that comes in that's super high from the triage team, from the Arctic Wolf side, they're actually calling us. They're not just waiting for the ticket. They're calling us, and they have a full escalation chain to make sure that they do get someone at Lloyd Group to kind of address the media if they see something going on.
Yeah, that's a great point. And we have built out and defined escalation paths as to when a ticket is, more severe than another, how to reach out to the Lloyd support team and make sure that we're remediating these properly and in a timely fashion. I do want to kind of take a step back here, because Bill talked a little bit about, making sure and verifying that we're gathering all of the necessary telemetry from across your organization's landscape. And I have a lot of organizations that come to me when we get introduced. They say, well, Sam, I have an endpoint detection and response tool in place. Isn't that enough to protect my organization? Am I gathering all of that? And my answer to that is usually, well, yes, it is a good piece of the puzzle, but it's not the full pie when you're looking at where threats are coming in from across an organization's landscape. So if you look at some of the data points and percentages on this screen, this is actual data pulled from our Arctic Wolf Security Operations Cloud platform as to where we're seeing the first indicator of compromise in incidents that we're seeing for organizations. So about 15% of them, the first point of contact is on the endpoint. So that's, again, an extremely important portion to monitor. But about 35% of those tickets are starting on the network layer or on the firewall. So that's where we're identifying it. And then another 25% is starting in their cloud applications, whether that be their infrastructure that they have in the cloud or Office 365 or SaaS applications. We're identifying a lot of things like business email compromise in there, and that's where those tickets are starting. We'll actually walk through an example of how we would go about remediating one of those at the end of this. And then the other 25% we're identifying within your Active Directory or multi-factor authentication, as well as the scans that we're doing externally on your environment to see if there's any open or exposed ports. So this is really the importance of having that broad visibility and holistic view into your environment and where we're seeing events and tickets come from within our security operations platform. So to parlay off this a little bit, wanted to talk a little bit more in depth about the 2 services that we've partnered with Lloyd Group on delivering and what's been so successful in the partnership so far. So as I mentioned earlier, this is managed detection and response. It's our flagship offering. I like to compare this to, or make the analogy to, ADT for your home. So if you have your home and you're trying to keep it protected, you keep cameras on your doors, the side of your house, you make sure that there's sensors on your doors at night or windows, and if someone tries to break in, the necessary authorities are contacted or coming to your house to help with the bad actor or the burglar that's trying to break into your house. Similar to that, managed detection and response gathers that broad visibility from across your threat landscape, is going to be monitoring any of the events that we're seeing and correlating all of the data against each other. And then the triage team is going to work with that Lloyd Group support team on identifying and remediating those threats that we see from across your threat landscape. If we've deemed it necessary, then we can do some containment functionality on our end that we work out with Lloyd Group throughout our onboarding process. And then again, this is all delivered with Lloyd Group by the concierge security team. So working on those proactive measures that they can take, meeting with them on a quarterly basis to ensure everything is running smoothly and what we can do to improve over time. So this is really solving for, those last 3 steps of that NIST framework: the detect, respond, and recover from cyber incidents. The other service that we've partnered with is really more proactive in nature. So if you think about ADT for your home, again, this is going to be ensuring that there's no broken windows on your house, that your doors are locked, that the garage door isn't just open or exposed. How we're delivering this service is we're proactively scanning your environment on a continuous basis to identify really any vulnerabilities or misconfigurations that we're seeing. So we're doing internal, external, and host-based vulnerability assessments and really helping prioritize, okay, what vulnerabilities and misconfigurations are on your most critical assets? What's leaving the company most exposed right now? Let's take care of those first, and then the other ones that we're seeing, we can prioritize those later. So with this service, we're doing security controls benchmarking, because actually around 70% of cyber threats could have been prevented had they met the top 5 CIS controls. So that's why Bill mentioned they're so important earlier, and delivering this service is how we really go about scanning and remediating some of those vulnerabilities in your environment. With this service too, we're also scanning the dark and gray web for any of your organization's usernames or passwords that may be in plain text on there, or may be exposed to an organization that had an incident earlier on, and making sure that we're really protecting you from that perspective as well. So this is really helping solve for that more proactive side of the NIST framework, the identify and protect portion of that. And then, organizations will say to me, Sam, I love the services. This is really great, but how does it all work on the back end? How are you gathering that telemetry? So I'm going to talk a little bit about the ways we're gathering it, some of the numbers that our triage team is seeing, and then Bill will talk a little bit about, again, just reiterating what Lloyd Group does and working on these tickets together. So how we're gathering the telemetry from across your threat landscape, we have a network sensor that we're deploying to collect any firewall logs or things from your network that we could want to see. We have an agent that we deploy on your endpoints to gather telemetry from any laptops, workstations, servers that you may have. And then we also have integrations with a lot of common cloud applications or security as a service tools that you may be using to pull all of that telemetry into our platform for that correlation, enrichment, and analysis. What I joke about is the kind of magic of Arctic Wolf platform, to really make sure that they're only escalating the necessary events that they need to the triage team for investigation. The triage team for investigation for an SMB customer, again, we define that as around 0 to 500 users. They're going to see around 300 investigations. They're going to do around 300 investigations per week for an organization of that size. And then they're going to vet some of those out, some of the false positives, and bring it down to about 1 to 5 tickets per week that Lloyd Group is going to help work on the remediation and recovery process with. I'll pass it back to Bill here. Bill, do you want to just talk a little bit about what you're doing, add some color to the remediation recovery, and what are some of the proactive things you're doing with the concierge security team?
Sure. So basically, once the ticket comes in, it comes into ConnectWise, our ticketing system. So review the ticket, assign to the team. Some things are good checks and balances. So they'll ask us things like, hey, we saw a firewall change. Was this you? Or if there's an admin account. So we have the people, we know what's going on with the clients base, so we could actually answer those. So some of those are, hey, it's just a normal process. We did this and it's checks and balances for us. Or it could actually be some kind of an incident. If there is an incident and we don't fully understand what's going on or we need color, we'll call. There's a number, and someone always picks up, which is great. And we can talk to someone about that, get more information, or we'll start working on it. And then we're like, hey, get us more logs. They'll send us kind of pertinent information that we need to help address that security incident. So we also have the kind of recurring meetings we talked about. So reviewing the clients, saying, oh, hey, yeah, they moved ISP, so let's do external vulnerability scanning. So that's actually something that comes with the MDR service for all clients. So we want to make sure we're keeping those up to date. If something falls off, they'll let us know, like, hey, we moved this log source. Oh yeah, we swapped out a firewall, we added this one. So they're making sure that, keeping the eyes on what's going on for us. And also they do the security checks every quarter where we're looking at what's new, they keep adding more integrations. So it's like, hey, do you have this? Then they could add that for it. So we'll work with that concierge team. And especially if there's a real incident, we'll work with them to basically gather all the logs that we need for forensics, while Lloyd Group and our security team kind of work on the containment phase of the issue and the recovery. And then we get all that data at the end to kind of help with the planning for the next one. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And that just goes to show how holistic the service is in nature in this partnership, and why we've worked so well together is just being that, holistic approach to security. We kind of teased this earlier, talking a little bit about, okay, what does an actual incident look like and how does that process all work? So I'm going to walk through very high level as to what a business email compromise attack could look like in an organization, and how we would identify and work with Lloyd Group to remediate that. And then I'm going to have Bill chime in on some, potential real world experiences that he may have seen in working with the Arctic Wolf team. So business email compromise, just to give you kind of a background, ransomware is usually the hot topic in cybersecurity. But if you look at a recent New York survey, business email compromise was the most common attack in the cybersecurity space, and it was the most financial losses that organizations experienced in 2022. So this is an attack that's not as commonly talked about, but it's very common within the industry. So this is typically how things go with it. The attacker leveraged previously stolen credentials from a user at an organization and essentially spams out multi-factor authentication notifications to the person's phone. The user keeps seeing them, denies a couple of them, and then finally accepts them. So Arctic Wolf would have seen from the Azure multi-factor authentication a couple of unsuccessful logins and then a successful login afterwards. So that's a point of telemetry that our platform would have seen and escalated. From there, the attacker opened a calendar event that's called best practices training, and the attacker begins adding the auto forwarding and auto deleting rules to the user's inbox. So what that means is any email that the user would get, is the attacker would automatically delete that from their inbox and forward it to the attacker's inbox, so they can kind of view in the background what that employee is receiving from emails. And this would have been escalated from the Office 365 logs that we would have seen, that the auto forwarding and delete rules were created. And that's immediately when an investigation would start by the triage team into user one's activity. The malicious attacker then uploads a PDF that's a malicious OneDrive with the intent to distribute it to all the invited attendees of that best practices training. Once the triage team goes and investigates, they verify that the account has been compromised, and then they recommend disabling the account and resetting the credentials to the Lloyd Group team. The Lloyd Group team then confirms that the user one had a compromise on their account, disable the account, and then they work with the concierge security team from here to check the logs and data, like Bill talked about, doing some of the forensics of the users that may have accessed the phishing PDF. And the CST confirms the remediation took place before any users access the PDF. CST also assists Lloyd Group in remediating actions taken by the adversary. So taking you through the whole life cycle of a threat here. This is a very high level overview of it, but I guess, Bill, did you have any real world experiences that you wanted to share, or comments about what this looks like from your perspective?
Sure. So for business email compromise, I mean, that we've seen, unfortunately, a lot of that over the last couple of years. So the big triggers are those. One thing that's not mentioned here is foreign logins. So we'll actually get Arctic Wolf calls if there's someone successfully logged in from outside the US, something where they haven't seen before. So we'll get notified for those. The rules creations, a lot of times they'll start deleting rules or forwarding rules for invoices. So any of those kind of rules, they'll trigger us for there. And other things besides the business email compromise, we're seeing misconfigurations or things that are happening. Kind of external ports showing up. So someone opened up a remote desktop protocol port to come in for remote access. They were testing something, or it was a legacy rule on a firewall, and then all of a sudden something grabbed the IP and now it's active. We'll see those. With another one we just recently seen was a brute force attack. So they'll actually let us know if someone's brute forcing what's going on. And we actually figured out it wasn't even a domain account, but it was actually a local account, an old local account that was created on a firewall that came in. So we were able to kind of find that and then disable it and remove the attackers, and they can kind of move on because they were unsuccessful. So there's a bunch of different things that Arctic Wolf finds and lets us know. Those are just some of the real world examples that we've actually seen and helped mitigate before there was actually larger issues.
Great stuff. Good to hear. Yeah, there's multiple different attacks. This was just a very common one that we would like to walk through, but multiple different ways that we can identify things like this. Well, yeah, I guess that's kind of wrapping on what we wanted to talk about. I guess I'll turn it back over to Brian here to kind of start the Q&A if we got any in the chat, or if there's some that we had pre-canned that are common from other organizations when talking about this. Brian, I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Sam, and thank you, Bill. Very interesting and certainly timely information for everyone on the call today. Just a reminder, if anyone has any questions that they haven't uploaded yet, you can do so on the Q&A feature at the top of your screen. With regards to Sam, throughout the presentation, compliance has come up. How exactly does Arctic Wolf help map out different compliance needs for firms?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So that varies a little bit from industry to industry, whether you're a bank and have FFIEC compliance regulations, a credit union and have NCUA compliance regulations, or a manufacturing organization and have CMMC compliance that you need to adhere to. So what Arctic Wolf does is there's usually a lot of controls that these compliance requirements have you map to, and are you satisfying it or are you not? So the Arctic Wolf Concierge Security team can actually work with the Lloyd Group team, not only to identify which controls we're mapping to, but really help provide artifacts to the organization that may be going through an audit right now, or just needs to provide this to an organization that's asking questions about that, helping with those questionnaires, and then providing artifacts of what we're actually doing as proof that we're complying with these certain regulations. So that's a great question.
Great. So obviously, cyber and risk it's important, and since there's so much buzz around that, there's a lot of different tools that are out there on the market. Even when we were going through our own evaluation, we talked to a number of people, evaluated a number of solutions. How does Arctic Wolf differentiate, your solutions and services from others in the market?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. I think I would kind of pull it back to, what we talked about on the initial slide, and just driving home the overall value that Arctic Wolf provides is for one, having that broad visibility across your threat landscape, being able to see, because a lot of the competitors in the industry today are companies that we come up against are just looking at one portion of your environment. So seeing the holistic picture of your environment not only allows us to make sure we're not missing anything, but also brings up the speed and time to which we can react to certain cyber events going on in your environment. And then I think too, just the level of service delivery that Arctic Wolf provides through our well-experienced concierge security team and triage team, not only having this reactive service that can, just alert teams on when a threat is going on in their environment, but kind of working with them through the holistic scope of what an entire threat lifecycle looks at. that service delivery is really where we stand out, and why a lot of satisfied customers today are continuously renewing with Arctic Wolf services. And it's why we have a 95% retention rate. So I think that's, really why we stand out and why we're growing at such an exponential rate. But that's a great question.
Thanks, Sam. With regards to, right, so when we talk to clients and prospective clients, the investment of tools comes up, and there's not, in many cases, there's not a focus on the back-end security operations center. Can you talk a little bit about why that is so beneficial when implementing a tool like a SIM?
Yeah. So just to kind of walk through, the SIM technology is a great tool that a lot of organizations leverage, because it's essentially a log aggregation tool to pull in the holistic telemetry from across an organization's threat landscape into one central location, which is similar to what we're doing with our Arctic Wolf platform. The problem with just having a tools approach in your organization is who's going to be looking at those events that the SIM is escalating, or who's going to be looking at those events that the tool is escalating. And that's why it's so important to have a security operations center like the Arctic Wolf triage team to be monitoring these events on a continuous basis, because organizations that use just a tools approach may see about 300 alerts per week, but that 159th could be the one that could be the malicious attack on your environment. So having that security operations center continuously monitoring your environment for any real potential incidents of compromises, hugely important to the approach in security, and pairing those people and processes with the technology that they have in place.
Thanks, Sam. Bill, just a similar question with regards to, Sam just answered the question around why security operations is so important, to our clients. Why is it so important to have a healthy balance between the security ops and the risk advisory services? Where's the value in the risk side of that?
Sure. So there are two separate items. One is kind of looking at and protecting it, and then the risk is actually managing it. Because you need to know what's going on. What are your risks that are coming up? What are the attacks vectors that are coming, mechanisms, so that you can then prepare for them. So some of these things that we don't have tools for, or we don't have policies or technical controls, you want to make sure you're putting those in. So if we're starting seeing something, and this data can be driven from that SOC, so we're seeing all these vulnerabilities, or we're seeing all these attacks on here, and you don't have MFA under VPN, we're seeing all these brute force, they're eventually going to get in unless we put in extra controls or measures. So we want to make sure we bring those up. And the SOC, if they see that data, that actually gives us real life data to help support the things that we're trying to do, and show that, hey, you need to do this, or eventually it's going to happen. So they kind of work hand in hand.
Great. Well, I think that's all that we have in terms of questions for today, unless anyone wants to drop one in quickly. So thank you, Sam and Bill. It was very helpful, and I hope that everyone that attended today, at least had one item that they can take away and potentially implement or raise within their firms. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to us, and we're happy to answer them. With regards to next steps, Sam, I know you put this together. I'm happy to read off it, but thinking of one area of security posture you can help improve, and getting in touch with us in terms of next steps. And of course, the prize that Sam had mentioned, lunch on us via gift card. If you meet with either Lloyd and Arctic Wolf following this webinar. So we're happy to send a gift card in response, and thanks for taking the time to meet with us. And again, we appreciate the time today, and thanks again to Sam and Bill.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.